What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have a super fun tutorial for you. I'm going to show you how to create paint from scratch using Python and the Pygame module. So building paint is not at all complicated. It is super fun, and it's obviously something that is a terrific project for beginners or experienced programmers who are trying to get more familiar with the Pygame framework. The core aspects of this game really just boil down to letting the user select a brush size, letting the user select a different color, and then tracking the mouse position and keeping track of when we've clicked to draw those images onto the screen. The whole project isn't even 100 lines of code, and you can do it in way under an hour. If you have any questions on what you see in this video or want to see some additional functionality in a future video, let me know about in the comments below. If you're enjoying the tutorial and like the content on the channel, be sure to subscribe and check out tons of our other stuff. Now let's start the tutorial. All right, let's get going on building our own paint. So I'm gonna blast through some of the initial setup stuff since they're pretty generic to every time you use a Pygame game and you use this framework, but be sure to let me know if you have any questions or comments or need me to slow it down in future videos. Essentially start by importing the Pygame module. If you don't have it, you might have to run pip to install it, and then do pygame.init. A few things every game is going to need. You want to set up a frame rate right in the beginning, and you want to set up a timer that's going to control how fast your game runs by doing pygame.time.clock, just like that. If you're going to have any text in your app, then you want to set up a font here as well. I do that in my other ones, but actually for Paint, we don't need any text, so we're not going to worry about that right now. You are going to want to put, I typically think it's useful to put the width and the height of your game in variables. I don't recommend just hard coding it and then you have to keep referencing back to the beginning to see where you first hard coded it to use it. So we'll do width 800 and height 600, but for sure on your application, make it whatever size you want. That works well for a little widget pop-up paint. And then we're going to use that in screen, and that's going to be pygame.display.setMode, and then all we have to do is give it our width and our height. So again, that would be where you'd hard code your values if you wanted to, but we're going to be using those a lot, as you'll see throughout this project. So I like the idea of setting it up right there. And then the last thing we'll do up here for now is we'll do pygame.display.setCaption. And let's just call this paint because I don't think that's copyrighted. So we'll go ahead and start right there. And then let's start by just doing everything we have to do to get the game running. So we'll say while run, and just above this, we're setting up the main game loop, as I like to call it, but essentially it's just your active loop, the code that runs constantly while your program is running. And so to get this to start up, you're going to want to use this run variable and set it equal to true. And that's also how you'll see in a second we're going to control when to quit out of the game. So while we're running, we want to use that timer that we set up, and we use this .tick operation, and then you give it your frame rate, so the speed at which you want it to run. You could punch a 60 right in there if you didn't want frame rate to be equal to 60, but I like having that in a variable. I like putting everything into a variable. It's just easier to track it down later. So we'll do timer.tick at the frame rate, and then we'll do screen.fill, and all we have to do here is give it a color. And something I actually really like about the Pygame framework is if you have quotations, you can type in a lot of colors and it can process them just like this. Typing in white just like this is the same as typing in an RGB value here of like 255, 255, 255. It could handle this as well. That's what it's actually looking for, is an RGB, but it knows that this white is correlated to that. So we're going to do screen.fill, and then this is what I call the event handling, and it's essentially you want to start with for event in pygame.event.get, and this is handling everything in your game. So this event.get is getting everything from the keyboard, your mouse, basically everything that's happening to your computer is in this pygame.event.get. And the first thing we want to do is just say if event.type is equal to, and then pygame.quit, like this. And so you'll see the default Pygame window when it opens up in just a sec has the red X button that's like standard in all applications. It's up in the top right corner. But you have to tell it what you want the game to do when you press that button. And what we want it to do is pretty simple. We're just going to set that run variable equal to false. So we'll say run equals false, and then we'll come out of this for loop down below, and we'll do pygame.display.flip. So this is what you have to add to actually get things drawn onto your screen. And then the last line is just pygame.quit, meaning we've made it out of this while run loop, and now we can just quit out of the application. So these 24 lines of code, not even because of all the spaces, should be all we have to do to get our basic window opening up. And here you go. You can see it's just a plain white rectangle, but this is cool. We have an application, and now we're going to start adding stuff to it. Okay. So right under screen.fill of white, I'm going to put our first function in here, and I'm going to call it draw grid. Or I'll say draw menu, because what I want to do now is I want to put a banner up at the top that has the different brush sizes and the different colors that the player is going to be able to select. And it's a lot cleaner code to separate this out from your main game loop in a function called draw menu. So to set up a function, you come up here and you say define draw menu and then a colon, and now we're inside of the function that's going to run every iteration of that loop. So let's start with a background rectangle, pygame.draw.rect, and we'll put it on the screen. And for this one, I think we'll make it gray so that it's a little different from the white background, but we will be able to use white or black on a gray background and it'll still look good. Okay, so we'll say put it on the screen, make it gray, and then we're gonna, for this rectangle argument, which comes third, we need to give it 4 arguments. We give it an X and Y start position, and then we give it a width, and we give it a height. And you can play around with these if you want. I like the idea of having this rectangle span the entire width of the screen, and 70 high was plenty high for all the functionality I wanted to add. So I'm gonna go ahead and run it. And you can see we get this gray banner across the top. I'm going to be able to fit all of the basic buttons I want to put in this game right here. You can play around with it if you want to change up the style of yours at all. All right, so now we'll just do something to help kind of differentiate the top space from the rest of the screen. We'll draw a line at the very bottom, and we'll make it black. So we do pygame.draw.line, put it on the screen, make it black, and then this needs 2 set of coordinates for drawing a complete line. It needs an X and Y start coordinate, and we'll make it X coordinate 0, Y coordinate 70 to put it right at the bottom of that rectangle we just made. And then the end position, we're going to make it at the width of the screen, so meaning the second coordinate is all the way across and still at 70, so it'll be a horizontal line. And then we can actually, after that end coordinate, we can come in and give it one more argument, which is going to be the width of the line, and we'll make it 3. So if you see that now, that actually looks a lot more like a menu. It's a different color, and then it has a border as well. So that's what we just did there. All right, now let's get into the actual useful stuff, which is going to be, we're going to start drawing the different buttons for the different brush sizes for the player. So we'll start with this, I'll call it XL brush. So meaning the extra large brush. And let's start just putting rectangles on the screen. So pygame.draw.rect. I'm going to go fairly quick through these because we've drawn one rectangle already. So hopefully the format doesn't throw you off here. But my basic way of showing the player the different brush sizes is going to be putting a black rectangle on the screen and then a white rectangle in front of it of the size that the brush is actually going to be. So we'll say put this rectangle on the screen and make it black. And then for the actual rectangle arguments, let's just make it start at 10 and 10. So it gets away from the top and the left edge by a little bit. And then we'll make it 50-50. Just so that it is not completely filling it. So let's take a look at that. And I think that looks pretty good. Hopefully you concur. But let's move on now. So I'm going to draw the 4 boxes for it. We're going to do extra large, large, medium, and small. And basically, I like having these 10 pixel spaces. So we're just going to be moving them basically 60 at a time to the right. So we'll do 10, 70, 130, and 190. And there we go. We have 4 rectangles. Now that's not really useful yet because we're not doing anything to differentiate them. And so let's add that. That's going to be this pygame.draw.circle. And then this is still going to be on the screen. Now this we're going to make white. And we're going to give it a center right in the middle of those squares. So that's the next argument that the circle needs, is the center point. And if you think about it, this starts at 10, 10, and then it's 50 by 50. So the middle needs to be 35, 35. And now for this extra large brush, I think we're going to go ahead and make the radius 20. So we'll make the size of the circle 20. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That's a fairly large circle inside the rectangle. And I think that's a fine extra large brush size. Okay, now let's go ahead and do the next one. So this will now be the large brush size, and we'll just go down 5 pixels at a time. And again, all we have to do is just scoot it 60 pixels to the right because the center point for the Y is going to be the same for all of these. So we'll make the medium brush 10 pixels and at 155. And then we will make the small brush just 5 pixels and centered at 215. Now let's go ahead and look at that, make sure we didn't do anything silly here. Yeah, and I think that looks really good. That's going to give you 4 very different options for painting once we get into it. Okay, now let's do the second part of this grid that's going to be really important, and that is going to be drawing the different colors that the player has access to onto the screen. And so I know I said that Pygame can process a lot of colors, but actually for this one, I'm going to use RGB values to make it clear. If you want to add any additional number of colors to your app, this is how you do it, and all you have to do is change these RGB values. Okay, so let's start drawing these rectangles, and I'm going to start all the way at the right of the screen. So I'll start with just a basic blue, and we're going to use pygame.draw.rect. And so there's going to be a lot of pygame.draw.rect in this next section. So I'll be copying like the basic shape each time and just modifying coordinates. But so all colors on a computer are going to be R, G, and B. And if you ever are trying to search for a specific color, there are literally a million ways of figuring out the RGB value of your specific color. You can Google it, you can play around with trial and error, or you can use like a color wheel tool and kind of figure out what you're looking for. Basically R, G, and B. So for blue, it makes sense. There's no R and G, it's just B, and that's going to be like a real dark but very like vibrant blue. And now we're going to put this over towards the right edge of the screen, but still not fully touching. We're still going to keep some borders. So let's put it at width -35, and we'll make it half the size of those previous ones. We'll still have it come down 10, but we'll make it 25 wide and 25 tall. Okay. And hopefully this is going to give us a blue rectangle over on the right. Yep, there we go. And now let's pack a whole bunch of colors in really close to that blue rectangle, kind of like a traditional paint app, which gives you like a little menu of the common colors to choose from. So we'll start with red, blue, green, and yellow. And we'll make sure those all look good. And then we will go ahead and add some more as long as we get all those squared away. So let's start by fixing the RGB values. Red is obviously all R, and then no G and no B. Green is no R and no B, just a lot of G. And then yellow is all the R and all the G, but no B. So it's 255, 255, 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do these rectangles one on top of another and then slowly move further left. So for this second one, for red, it's going to be all of the same positions. We're just going to move it 25 down. And then so these next two are still going to be at 10 and 35, but we need to move them 25 further to the left. So it'll be minus 60 now. Okay, so hopefully these coordinates made sense. If not, pause them and maybe think about what we just did, but there's so many colors that we're about to draw. I don't want to slow down on this part too much, but you can see we have a blue, a red, a green, and a yellow. So let's get a few more colors because I like the idea of having a few more options than that. So let's just add a few more ones that'll be easy because they're basic RGB combinations. But really, this is probably going to be one of the things you'll really have some fun with. So we'll just do teal and purple and then white and black because those are sort of all the basics. So when I say teal, that's what you get when you get all the G and the B and no R. And then purple is all the R and all the B. Sorry, I'm getting a little twisted there. And then white is all zeros and black is all 255s. And so to keep coming back, every time we have two new ones, we need to make sure we slide 25 further to the left. So 85, 85, and then 110, 110, just like that. And now if we load it in, we should have 8 colors. There you go. So these are 8 standard, pretty fun colors, but I think once we get the drawing mechanism working, it's going to look pretty darn good. So essentially, we're going to want to pass this list of buttons back to the main game loop so that we can interact with them and check if the players clicked on any of them. And we'll want to do that for the brushes as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list inside my function. I'm going to call it brush list. And I'm going to put all of those rectangles that we define up here, I'm going to put them in this list. So XL brush, L brush, M brush, and S brush are going to be in my brush list. And then in my color rectangle list, I'm going to put in blue, red, green, yellow, teal, purple, white, and black. Just like that. And the reason I did that, you'll see in a second, because we are about to interact with the different colors and actually like be able to select one by seeing if the mouse clicks on any of them. So to pass information back out of a function, you use a return statement, and we're going to return 2 things. We're going to start with the brush list and then the color rectangle. And what you'll see in a second is we're actually going to want to pass another list of all these RGBs in the same order as these rectangles so that we can correlate the two. But let's go ahead and just start by processing this. So we're returning the brush list and the color rectangle, which means this draw menu, we actually have to set it up this way. Brushes and colors are equal to draw menu. So if you return or send a different number of parameters into a function than it actually uses or calls for, you're going to get an error when you boot up. So make sure you have the same number of parameters coming back and you send in the appropriate number of parameters. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to say if event.type is equal to pygame dot, and this is a new one now, mouse button down. So this means that you're clicking the mouse on, and this technically is going to be any mouse button, so left click, right click. You can distinguish that by like checking what button was pressed. I'm going to assume if you're clicking a mouse button and you're on any of these buttons, you're okay with selecting that. So then inside of this mouse button down, we'll do 2 fairly similar things, but we'll check through the 2 lists that we just passed back to see if you clicked on any of them. And the way we'll do that is we'll set up a for loop, and we'll say for I in range, and we'll start with the brushes list. Length of brushes. Okay, so this is saying for however long that brushes list is. So if you decide that you want to add 3 more brushes, go for it. This code will work for you the exact same way. So for I in range, length of brushes, and what we're going to do is check if the brush square at I collides with the mouse. So it's going to be if brushes at I dot, and then this is a really nice built-in tool that the Pygame framework has, dot collide point, and then all we have to do is give it an X and Y coordinate, and it'll check if that rectangle overlaps with that point. And the X and Y coordinate in this case is what's called event.pos. So that means position, POS. And event.position is an X and Y coordinate. It's a tuple that shows the X and Y position that the mouse button is at when you click. And so this is a really useful tool. And what we want to do is say if brushes at I collides with the event.position, we want to put that information into a variable that's going to tell us what size we should actively be drawing as. So we'll make this variable and we'll call it active size. But we have to think about what we did now, because you could come up here, I guess, and probably flip the order of these and put small first and extra large last, because I is actually going to be 0 for 20, and then it's going to be 3 for 5. So what we want to do is say if active size is going to be the radius of the circle we're drawing with, then I think we want active size to be equal to 20 minus I times 5. And we're going to use this in just a second to show what size rectangle was, or what size brush was selected. But think about what this is doing. The first brush is the extra large brush, meaning it has a radius of 20. So I in that list is going to be 0. So this is going to be 20 minus 0, so it'll be 20. But then for the one that's 5, I is equal to 3. And so if you decide to go with more brushes or do them with a different spacing, just figure out this formula on your own. This is the one for what we're doing in the video. And now we're going to come down. Oops, I added a backslash. Now we're going to come down and we're going to basically put that entire for loop in again, but this time instead of brushes, we're going to loop through the colors list. And so we'll say for I in range, length of colors, if colors at I collides with the point event.pos, and none of that has to change, but what we want now, instead of active size, we want variable active color. And we want to set active color equal to basically the RGB value of colors at I. And so to do that, we're going to pass one more thing, just like I said, color rect. We're going to pass an RGB list back. So we'll say RGB equals and then new list, and we'll just come in here and start copying our RGBs in. Make sure you get them in the same order, because that's what we'll be using to look up what the active RGB should be. So we just got to do a little copy paste. And I know this part is a little bit tedious, but it's actually pretty smart the way we're doing it. It's saving us a lot of programming down the road. So bear with me. 0255. We're on to purple. Alrighty. And next we've got white, and then black, almost done. Alrighty. So we're going to return that RGB list, which means we have to come back to our function and say colors, and then also RGBs. And that's what I'll call it. If you don't like the name RGBs, that's fine. But we'll set RGBs at I equal to the active color. And so now what we have is we are checking what brush and what color were selected and storing those in these variables active size and active color. So that's great. Now we have this information on the outside world. Now what we should do is we should initialize those variables, because if you have a variable like active size or active color that you use every loop and you call it before the function has run once yet, you'll throw an error because you try referring to a variable before it's been defined in the code. So to start, we'll just say active size is equal to 0, and we'll set active color equal to white right when we start up. It doesn't matter because the size is 0, so it's not going to draw anything. But the color being white would also make it invisible. Okay, so let's use the active color and the active size. You're probably saying, great, we moved them into variables. What are we actually going to do with them? Good question. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to draw a little circle in the correct size and color wherever your mouse is. So to do that, we're going to grab the position of the mouse, and I'm going to put that in a variable I'm going to call mouse. And to do that, we use the Pygame framework, and it's pygame.mouse.getPause, just like that. And again, it's going to give us an x and y tuple for the coordinates of the mouse. So that's what this is doing. And now that we have the mouse position, we can check if the mouse is in a position where we want to draw the circle. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say if mouse pause, just mouse at 1. So this is index 1. If you think what I just said, mouse is an x and y coordinate, where the y coordinate is index 1. So the x coordinate is index 0, y coordinate is index 1. And I just want to check that it's off of the menu. So the menu is the first 70 pixels up top. And I don't want to draw on the menu. You shouldn't be able to draw on the menu in most Paint apps, unless that's how you want to do it. So as long as the mouse position is far enough down, we're going to do pygame.draw.circle, and we're going to put it on the screen. And then for color, we're going to use active color. And then for center, it's just going to be the mouse coordinates. And then for the radius, it's just going to be active size. And so this now should give us a brush. It's not yet going to give us the functionality of painting, but it should let us test our theory about the brush changing. So there you go. I selected the big brush, and I selected this teal, light blue, and you can see it doesn't draw over the menu. It draws while we're in this window. Now let's try going to the small brush and pink. And hopefully you can see there, it updates. Let's do medium and red. And so just like that, we're tracking the position of the mouse, and we have this preview of what it's going to look like by drawing the circle where the mouse is. So this is really cool. We're super close. Now, what I think we want to do next is actually take a look at how do you paint things onto the board. And to do that, we need to check if the buttons have been pressed on the mouse. And we actually don't come down in this mouse button down area. This is checking if any mouse button is pressed. I want to know specifically if the left mouse button is pressed. And so to do that, I'm going to make a new variable called left click, and I'm going to check to see if the mouse button is pressed by, again, calling pygame.mouse, and then there's a built-in function for it called getPressed. But getPressed is going to give you 3 things. It's going to give you the left button, the right button, and the scroll wheel middle button, and it's going to tell you true or false if all of those are pressed. So what we want is just the first one, which is at index 0. That's going to tell us if the left mouse button has been clicked. And the reason this is important is we're going to set up a new if statement and say if the left button is clicked and mouse 1 is greater than 70. So essentially, we're saying we want to check if the mouse button is in the area we do want to be able to paint, so not over the menu. But if that's the case, we want the circle that is where kind of the background circle is. We want that to be committed to a list of essentially all of the spaces we're trying to paint. So to do that, right in the beginning, when we load the app in and we have an empty painting, I'm going to make the painting equal to an empty list. And all we have to do is say, okay, when I click, I want you to add some information to painting. So to do that, it's painting.append, and then the information we want to append to it. And so I want to give it, in parentheses, a few things. I want to give it active color, and then I want to give it the mouse coordinates. Oops, I hit enter. And then I want to give it the active size. And this is all of the information we need to store to tell a function what information about that circle it needs to draw it. So this is really cool. We're creating a list every time we have the left mouse clicked and the mouse is in the right spot. So we need to take this list and we need to do something with it. And for that, I'm just going to create a new function that I will call draw painting. And what we'll do is we'll pass in our painting list just like this. And now let's come up and actually make that function. So underneath the menu in here, we'll do define draw painting. And we are passing in the painting list, which I will just call paints. So you're probably familiar with the for loops because we've done them a few times, but it's going to be for I in range length of paints. So this is going to go through the entire list of painted circles and draw pygame.draw.circle, put it on the screen, and now we have passed in literally all the information it needs directly in order. So the color is at paint I, or paints I, index 0, right? Think about this function. When we append anything to the painting list, it's active color, mouse, active size. So it needs the color first, and then it needs the center coordinates, which are going to be the next one, and then it needs to know the radius. So we set this up in a really great way to immediately draw every circle that's in the paintings list. And this is it for the draw painting list. Okay, so let's go ahead and press play. I'm going to grab the big circle and I'm going to grab light blue, and I'm just going to, Pygame has no attribute raw. Did you mean draw? Yes, I did. Okay, so right here, I said pygame.raw.circle, which is hardcore, but we need pygame.draw.circle. Let's try that again. All right, that is sweet. So I got, yeah, I can change colors. I can change brush sizes. One thing you might notice, the background preview of the circle is behind things that we drew already. So even though it draws correctly when we do click to draw, we want the preview to be over top of everything else. And to do that, all we have to do is come down in our loop here, and where we draw the mouse, which is if mouse greater than 70, then draw this. And all we have to do is move that below where we draw the painting. So we want the circle to come after the painting's been drawn. This order is really important because that will determine what gets to be on top and what's on the bottom. Okay, so one thing I think would be really useful actually would be indicating what the active color and the active size are on our menu, because right now if you click a brush, the only way to see what size brush you have selected is if you're down in the app, and same with the color. So let's go back to our draw menu. I just lost track of it. Here it is, draw menu. And let's pass in a couple things. Let's pass in the active size and let's pass in the active color. And let's take a look at how we're going to use that. So we did size and we did color. And what I want to do for this is I just want to come kind of in the middle of the screen and I want to draw a new circle. So pygame.draw.circle, put it on the screen. And for color, I just want to make it the color that we pass in. And for position, it doesn't really matter. Pick some open space in the middle of the screen. I'll put it close to the middle of the menu, so 40, 35 for the middle. And then I'm going to make this a pretty big one. I'm going to make it 30. And this is just going to let you know what color you have actively selected. And it would look pretty cool with a border actually, so I kind of like doing this. I'm going to put a outside circle that's going to be dark gray, but the exact same circle shape, but I'm just going to give it a border width of 3. And now you'll get this cool 2-tiered effect. So you see it's got like a dark gray circle. Maybe you can't see it, but I kind of like the look. And then you can see when I select a color, it tells me what I have selected. So that looks pretty good. Let's do one more thing with the active size, and let's just come down below these rectangles And let's say if size is equal to 20, then we'll want to take kind of this rectangle and do that same sort of border concept. So this exact same border, or this exact same rectangle, but we'll make it green and we'll just make it a border of 3. And then we can come in and we can kind of do that exact same code for 15, 10, and 5. And you can optimize your code a little bit by making these elifs, because if you've already done one of the previous ones, you don't have to check if the rest are valid. You know we're only doing one at a time. And then just make sure to scoot these by 60. So 10, 170, 130, 190, just like before. And now this should be all we have to do to get like a rectangle. Yeah, there you go. Telling us what brush we've selected. And so I think that just makes the menu a little better. And probably the final thing I'll mention, because hopefully you're having a lot of fun following along, but maybe what you've noticed is if you take something and you drag it very quickly across the board, you don't get a super smooth shape. And that is in effect, that is happening because your frame rate is at 60. So you can actually slide the mouse quite a bit more than 60 pixels across the screen per second. If your computer can handle it, one way to improve this smoothness would be, you can see it doesn't look bad. It does track you pretty fast, but if you really streak across the screen, you don't get a smooth line at all. If your computer can handle it, you can try beefing this frame rate up to like 120, something higher like that. And now what you'll see is if I streak across the screen, it's still not perfect, but it is way smoother because it's drawing effectively twice as many per second. So it's kind of up to what your machine can handle, and if you really care, maybe you don't, and that's totally fine. So that's the basics of it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, leave me a like, leave me a comment, letting me know what you want to see next. That kind of stuff helps me out a ton. I've really been enjoying all of the support I've been getting and all the comments, and it's a lot of fun talking to you guys. This channel has really taken off recently, and I couldn't have done it with all the support, without all the support from you all. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I'll see you next time. Good luck with your code, and thanks for watching. Thanks. Bye.